Great morning. As always, thrilled to be with you on our BMG. Today's topic is one that you can implement immediately today. Everybody should have received a PDF last night. If you can, please go ahead and pull that up, unless, of course, you're driving, in which case, please just have this for yourself later. I highly recommend you print this out. This is a concept that helps people to shift their state of mind. The highest performers that I have ever met are always really good at shifting their state quickly. And this is one of the most powerful ways to do it, by leveraging pain or by leveraging pleasure. So we're going to jump into this. Got a lot of really cool examples and stories as always. So let's get to it. I want to start on the pain side for you guys today. So I want to share a very quick story. This is a true story. Don't judge. But when I was a little boy, I walked into a Walmart with my mom, and I was walking with her, and we walked past this toy aisle. And of course, I wanted to go down and see it. So I ran down the toy aisle and I found this little tiger figurine. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I can remember every detail of it. And I was like 5 or 6 years old. Still to this day, I remember every detail of this little tiger figurine. And of course, I didn't conceptualize money or anything at this point. I was just a little boy. So I just grabbed the tiger and I shoved it into my pocket. Now, I knew it was the wrong thing to do, but I did it anyway. And so we returned home, and I remember my mom seeing me pull this little tiger out of my pocket. And she said, absolutely not. This is entirely unacceptable. So she leveraged pain around theft. So basically what she did was we had a family friend who was a police officer. She called the cop and told him to come over and arrest me. This 5-year-old boy, and I'll never forget it. This guy shows up to the house. He puts me in handcuffs, puts me in the back of the patrol car, and starts driving me around the neighborhood. And he's sitting there saying, is this really where you want to be 10 years from now? It horrified me. But that level of pain was so high that I affiliated it with theft. And so from that point on, never stole. So you listening in the audience may think this is a little bit extreme, but I'm absolutely grateful for this experience. Now, by quick raise of hands, is anybody in here familiar with Pavlov? Okay, cool. So Viktor Pavlov is a Russian psychologist, among other things. He is famous for Pavlovian theory, which you may have heard of. Pavlovian theory is one of the best ways to leverage pain. So he did this in a particular study with dogs, and it was very simple. What he would do was he would ding a bell and simultaneously feed the dogs. So now every single time that bell was rung, the dogs affiliated that auditory response with food. And so over time, he continued to ding the bell every time he fed the dogs. And then one day, he decided that he was not going to feed the dogs when he rung the bell. So he rings the bell, all the dogs come, they pile up, they're salivating, ready for dinner, and he never feeds them. And so the point is when you are able to leverage your sensory acuities or inflict a particular point of pain, you can stop anything. So with massive amounts of pain affiliated with behaviors, habits, any form, you can ultimately cease this. Now, he took this a level further, and you may have heard this in Common Day. I would challenge people to use this, by the way, because it absolutely works. Have you guys heard of the rubber band theory? So this is from Pavlov again, affiliating pain with a neurological response. So here's how you would use this. And again, you can do this immediately today. You quite simply put a rubber band on your wrist. Doesn't matter which wrist, just put a rubber band on your wrist. And anytime that you have a negative thought, a negative action, something that you do not want to continue, you simply snap the rubber band on your wrist. That neurologically will associate negative construct or pain with that outcome. So this is a form of neuroassociative conditioning. And you can do this for anything. Again, with Pavlov and the dogs, he did this through auditory neuroassociative conditioning, right? Now you can do this through a lot of different forms. but pain can be a super, super powerful tool. So let's dive into this exercise because I think you guys are going to get a ton from this. So I really like this quote, by the way. Pain is a pleasure in disguise. So true. So true. So, by the way, guys, everything that any person on this call ever does is a response to either avoid pain or for the desire of pleasure. That's what all of our actions are based around. So again, when you can recognize this and use these things to your advantage, you can shift that state of being very quickly. And again, that is one of the most powerful tools in the human disposal. So, by the way, by raise of hands, has anybody been to the point where you waited until the pain was so high that it forced you to act? Has anybody been there before? Everybody's hand should have gone up. We've all done this. We all wait. We have something that we know we must complete, a task we must get done. But we wait until a crisis occurs to force us into action. I've been guilty of this in the past, one that I can admit that I'm not super proud of, but I've done this in the past around taxes, right? You know, the taxes are coming up every year. We don't want to do them. So we just wait. Let me file that extension. Let me wait another year or two. Now it's a crisis and we're forced to do it. But there are plenty of examples here. So the thing about a crisis is once you see the crisis, it is no longer asking your permission. It's demanding that you act. It's like if you had a hole in the roof and it was only a little raindrop here and there, not a big deal. But if you let it sit over time, those raindrops are going to become a small trickle and then a little stream. And before you know it, your house is flooded, right? So again, if you want to stop a habit or if you want to avoid any particular outcome, you want to associate high levels of pain with them, right? You continue to do this over and over and over. You are neurologically conditioning yourself to avoid those words, those habits, those environments, whatever it is. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Just say yes. Awesome. Let's go. So, by the way, I highly recommend that you just take a quick second to either write this down or contemplate this for a quick minute. What is your most painful memory? What is, or it doesn't have to be the most, but let's just say like one of the top 5. Just think for a quick second. What is one of the top 5 most painful memories that you have? Can I get a thumbs up when you have it in mind? I'm not going to ask you to share this, by the way. You keep this to yourself. Real quick, how long ago did this happen? Are we talking hours, days, weeks, months, years? Just throw out the timeline. Like, how long ago did this event occur?
Decades.
Decades ago. Okay. Anybody else?
Years.
Years. Okay. Awesome. We can use that memory to get results, right? One thing that people shy away from is this term stress. Like as soon as we hear the word stress, most people get this feeling in their gut. They want to leave the room. They just don't want to hear it. But the truth is, any great feat that you have occurred, you had to have an element of stress to get to that point. You had to have some form of pressure that was pushing you towards action, right? So when you look at that painful memory, I want you to hold on to that for a quick second because we will use this. So here's a different question. What pain points do you use on a day-to-day to create action? Go ahead and just shout this out. I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you don't have one, I'll share one first. But again, the question is, what pain points do you use every day or currently to create action?
Being broke.
Okay, Brennan, let's take that one for a second. That's gold, right? So the concept of a lack of resources, and in this particular scenario, money, right? Anybody else use this, by the way? I'd say pretty much everybody on this call uses this, and probably on a daily basis, right? Because we all have that urge to stay in bed, but we know that the world demands from us. And so if we didn't have to go out and achieve and grasp these things, we could just stay in bed all day. So we use that fear of poverty to create action within us. Bob, what were you
Well, I
going to say?
Well, I go on. It's the reason why I go after the money, because of hunger and shelter.
There you
Right?
go.
The pain of cold, being cold out there in the street, and hunger motivate me. And hunger motivates me at least 3 times a day. And the fear of being put out into the street, those two things make me want money because it's the only right at this point.
So I am so glad that we went in this order and that Bob shared that. The reason why I'm so glad about this is because when we talk about pain, we want to capture a deep emotion. Bob just took this a level deeper. And the reason he did so is because guess what? Money is not going to be a strong enough motive long term. It's just not. Hands down, that's a fact that you're going to have to face. It's not going to produce enough result. You have to capture a deeper emotion. And Bob took that exactly where we want to go. He took it to sustenance, right? Well, look, if I want to live, I got to freaking eat. The way that I eat right now is through money. So again, you were able to leverage that pain point of, well, my existence depends on food. So I've got to go produce so I can put food on the table, right? Anybody else have a pain point they'd like to share that helps you to create action? Okay, so go ahead.
I was going to say pain of not being able to like live the way I want or my family like provide. So.
Absolutely. So it's that standard of living, right? And that's so powerful, Alexa. Thank you for sharing. I think that most people have a particular standard and you either are protecting that or you're letting it sit idle, right? So I'll share a personal one with you guys. So everybody on this call probably knows that I love the health environment. The reason I've got to that point is because my grandma has beat cancer 7 times. My mom has multiple sclerosis. My biological father died of a heart attack at 52. His dad, my grandfather, died of a heart attack at 50. So I've had all these pain through medical related things. And so I take it upon myself at a younger age to avoid that path through healthy diet, exercise, sleep, and water, right? So that is using that pain point to create action within. Now, let me spin this a different way. What things have you been putting off because of the expectation of some form of pain? And just share this one. Everybody does this. Everybody does this. So you're not void of this, right? What things have you been putting off because of some expectation of pain?
I'll go. I am very guilty of this. And of course, you know, the Jewish guilt doesn't help either. So last night I had to go look for my itinerary for flying out to my cousin in Baltimore. And so in doing so, because I didn't do everything that I need to do after the move-in yet, is I had this huge stack of paper of all bills and things like that. And I'm like, shit, this looks worse than I perceived it, or I remember it, or it's more, you know, like 7 Mary 3, it's more cumbersome, you know, than I had realized. So it made me think of all the administrative work I need to do between bills and reconciling and taxes and all the other things. And it's like a Pandora's box. It's like there was too much pain in leaving this the way it is. So my new goal as of last night was, okay, I don't want to deal with this shit anymore. I have to get over this hump. And so it made me want to sit there and double down my efforts to alleviate the pain and not have to go through this again by the end of the year. So I gave myself an end of year goal to sit there and fix something that had been bothering me probably for, you know, if not months, if not years.
Awesome. And I feel that everybody on this call can relate to that, Matt. You know, what happens is we have this pile and it starts to grow larger and larger and larger, and we just put it off and put it off and put it off, and we just add some dust on the top of it, and we just start to tell ourselves it's this beautiful picture in our room. But it's because we're avoiding a pain point. So, by the way, what I also heard from you, Matt, was that you are affiliating pain with Baltimore because you haven't got your Teflon vest yet. So you need to look into that. So anybody else have any? What's that?
What'd you say?
I said you don't have your Teflon vest for Baltimore.
My Teflon vest. Oh, because of all the crime there?
There you go.
Oh, I was gonna say it's like Teflon. It's like, isn't that in pans when you cook? You know, it's like I didn't know what a Teflon you were referring to. So anyway, well, at least the part of Baltimore going in is not that bad yet. So
Not that bad yet. Famous last words. So anybody else have any pain points that they'd like to share? I heard something. No? Okay, cool. So, all right. So anyway, let's move to the next part. Any questions, comments, or concerns before we go to the second half?
Well, there. I'm sorry. I don't know if Alexa, if you wanted to say something very quickly. I mean, one that I'm dealing with that I guess is I'll just put it out there. Loneliness.
Absolutely. So,
Think of loneliness, right?
oh, I can't hear you, Bob.
I was just saying that, but Alexa wants to say something.
No, I was giving a thumbs up, but that was a good one. That's a good share.
Yeah, I
So-
mean loneliness and it's and a desire to belong is something that I'm dealing with too, right? Like, how does that play in my life, right? And how much can I stand on my own, and how much pain can I take of being lonely while standing in my own mastery? I don't know. Just
Well,
you
that's a
these
really
conversations always bring up such deep things in me.
well. This is a really good point. And so, do you guys remember when we did the 6 human fears a couple weeks ago? That is the derivative, right? So when we say the derivative, what we're really saying is that often we will hold a pain in our mind. Let me explain this very quickly. You can have 2 Siamese twins, identical people, that go into the exact same situation and come out with completely different emotional interpretations of that event. So I share this with you because this is the example of the alcoholic dad. Okay, you may have heard this story before, but there's a father who loses his job and he turns to alcoholism and he becomes a degenerate drunk. He starts abusing his 2 sons, he starts abusing his wife, and it's just a nasty environment. So the boys grow up and they decide, you know what, we're moving out as soon as we possibly can. Both boys move out. They went through the exact same thing. Now, one of the sons ends up becoming an alcoholic, dies at 57 years old, has no kids, has no spouse, nothing. The other brother lives until he's 86 years old, has a wife, children, a prosperous, beautiful life. The point is they both went through the exact same thing, but they leveraged that pain to avoid it. Now, with Bob's point to that element of loneliness, it's that we look back to the 6 human fears, and that is like our funnel. We want to test this pain point by running it through that funnel. So what I'm really telling you is that when we talk about loneliness, and by the way, most people face this one, right? This would be categorized under the fear of loss of love. It could also be the fear of criticism, but it's predominantly the fear of loss of love. I've got to be real with you guys. This was my biggest one all of my childhood, right? So Bob, when you say that there's that element of loneliness, I absolutely relate to you there. Okay. So again, you can leverage whatever that pain point is, but you got to get to the root of it. So what I'm really saying is, in Bob's example, you would have to say, okay, well, if this is the fear of loss of love, let me run this pain point through this funnel. Where does this memory come from? And when you can isolate the emotional trigger, just one emotion that's triggering that response, then you can start to gain power over it. Okay. So we're going to come back to this because I do have an exercise at the very end that fuses both of these together. And that'll absolutely help with what you shared, Bob, which, by the way, again, everybody on this call probably has faced this as well. It's not just a Bob thing. It's not just a Keegan thing. Everybody has faced this, right? But again, hold on to those pain points because there's a really cool exercise at the end. So shifting over to pleasure really quickly. When we talk about the pleasure, here's the truth. The truth is that if you only operate on pleasure, you exceed indulgence or even to the point of gluttony. Now, of course, that's in regards to food, but we see this often. So there's a balance, right? You want to use a reward system. It's just like the carrot in front of the horse. If you are to dangle that reward in front of you, it pulls you towards that end result. So you want to leverage reward to help you complete a task. It's that I'll put it to you like this. If you've ever heard those commercials, right? I just heard this one yesterday in the gym. This is a great example. So there's this commercial about a car accident. And they're like, oh, if you've been in a car accident, we'll give you $160,000. And it's just like, what the heck are you talking about? The reason that people want to listen to that and they hear it is because they start to imagine that money in their bank account. And that's exactly what the commercial iterates. It says, can you imagine what it's going to feel like with $160,000 in your bank account from this car accident? And so people start to associate, remember, association, they start to associate making the call to this claim with a large sum of money being in their bank account. So it forces action, right? And so you can do this with things in your life as well. For example, if you say, hey, look, I'm going to work out extremely hard 6 days this week. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to sleep right. Good water intake. That means that Sunday I can take a relaxed day. And that pulls you towards Sunday because now that's the reward after all your hard work. So if you link pleasure or reward to a new behavior, a new outcome, massive pleasure to it, you will positively reinforce it. You will subconsciously seek those results. So by the way, I'd love to go around and just hear from the group. Does anybody in here have an extremely rewarding memory that they would like to share? I'll give you an example. Does anybody in here have kids? You know the process of going through the pregnancy, especially if you're the mother, and how taxing that can be, right? It puts your sleep out of whack. It puts your diet out of whack. It changes all these things. But you look at the reward at the end of the pregnancy and this beautiful life that you are able to bring into the world, and it helps pull you through that result, pull you through all the uncomfortable situations, right? That's a good example of something that we can set as the reward through that painful process. Do you guys have any other examples you'd like to share? Go ahead. Bob? Alexa? I couldn't tell if you were trying to say something, Lex.
Yeah, I could not.
That's me thinking. I didn't know I was off mute.
She's thinking out loud. Bob, go ahead.
I will go right back to the fear of losing shelter and food when my first son was born and we had to go on welfare because I couldn't make enough money. So that was pain, and that was pain for 2 years. That was real pain, and I could still feel it. And then the day that I got the job, the letter from IBM saying that I was hired, that was 10,000 times more pleasure than pain, and I still live with that day. I can associate those two that we've been talking about, the pain of not having enough money to feed your own children with then having, and I worked 2 years to get to IBM to actually getting that reward.
And just out of curiosity, how did it feel when you got that letter from IBM after all of that anguish and pain?
Well, it's hard to describe. It felt, I mean, you could have heard the screams around I always say it was the scream heard around the world, because my wife and I, those are the days when you received the offer in a letter, typewritten letter, signed by
Yeah.
the president. And so I mean, first of all, when we got the letter in the mail, we were trembling. And when we opened it up and it said, "We are happy and pleased," we screamed at the top of our lungs. That's all I could say.
And,
Yeah,
and
but Bob, you didn't read any further. It simply said, we're happy and excited to let you know we've gone a different direction.
well, here's
I
let me
know,
let me
and thank goodness, I only had a second grade reading level, so I couldn't understand, and I showed up, and they never even knew. That's why I always thought they were going to fire me at any minute.
But Keegan, on this note, though, I think Bob brings up a very good point. Some of the best pleasure moments come because of terrible pain,
That's exactly right.
you know? And so, like, for me, I was in a bad business partnership where the guy tried to take all the money and bad things happened. And my version of the IRS tried to take my house at one point. And like coming out of that, finding a way out of that and knowing it was over, took a very long time for that to happen, you know, a couple of years too, Bob. And so coming out of that, that pleasure moment of like, it's done, I have a good job, like all those things, that pleasure is so much better because of what you just went through.
And there's a really important note here, because let's break this down very quickly. I think that often when we act, we parallel natural law and human law. And what I'm really saying here is that when we intrinsically think about the letter that Bob received, that letter itself isn't what held the weight, right? It's not the letter that he received. We receive letters in the mail all the time. Most of them are spam, but we receive the letters. It's not the letter. It's the association of the reward, right? It is the, hey, this is the light at the end of the tunnel. We just went through these dark times for 2-3 years. Now there's resolution. And that's what pulls us there. So again, you can trick your mind. Here's a really cool fact. Our brains are super developed. However, the left and right hemisphere of the brain cannot differentiate between visualization and memory. So you can leverage visualization of the future or a past memory to create action. Again, guys, this is all centered around the beautiful tool of shifting your state of being. Well, look, Bob, I guarantee you this, if you were in a dark or difficult moment, all you would have to do is get into a meditative state and pull yourself back into the day that you received that letter, and immediately you would be in a completely different state of being. Yes or no?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you're singing my songbook here, shifting your state of being, and that's
Yep.
all that it is. Everything is a memory except for this present moment. Even the beginning of this call is a memory, and whatever is going to happen at the end of this call is not even there yet. It's only something I can imagine. So everything exists in either a memory or the forward. And our mind, our intellect, is always dealing with that and trying to deal with it as if it's in the present moment. But it really isn't. But you could create the same response as if it is in the present moment.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And one more thing, and then I want to get to this question, this point here really quickly. But one thing that I want to share based on what Brennan and Bob just said is that one of the greatest lessons, probably the greatest lesson that I ever took from Tony Robbins, was you cannot have success without failure. It's inevitable. It is part of the process. Okay. It has to occur. You have to learn how to fail forward to achieve that success. So I want to ask this question to everybody. Now, of course, you know, Alexa, Ashley, if you're driving, please don't do this. But I would invite you all to get into a visualization or a meditative state. So again, the way that I really like to do this is to sit up nice and straight. Practice that term hucko, head up, chest out. So you want to pull your chest up, you want to drop your arms to the side and just relax. Take a second to fidget and get comfortable. Do your own breathing exercise, whatever you prefer. But I want to ask everybody this question. What is the most rewarding goal that you could achieve in the next 2 months? What is the most rewarding thing that you could do between now and year's end to close out 2022? You have it 60 days. What could you do? What would that look like? And I'd love to hear from the group. I'd love to hear what comes to mind.
I'll chime in.
Matt?
I already went over the first one, which to me is going to be significant. I've made a goal for myself, which I call it the people Poochie principle, almost like the horse dangling the carrot. Well, for me, like if the Poochie, has to take a pee or shit, you give the dog a treat. It's the same thing with people. So I said to myself, I said, self, I am not going to go out for food unless I do burpees before I leave the house. So unless I do burpees, I will not go out that day. I have to eat at home. So I kind of like, give myself a goal where, okay, there's pain in not being able to go out, but there's pleasure if I, can go out because I did my exercise. So after my Zooms today, I'll do like 12 or 13 or 14 burpees, and then I'll go about my day, and then it'll be, reward of fillet of chick. So
Let's go.
it's also getting in better shape. So like I told my cousin Diane in Baltimore without the Kevlar vest, is to sit there, and I said I have lost weight. I'm in better shape than when you last saw me. So in order to keep on that goal that I set for myself, when I told her that this week, I have to, engage in Operation Hebrew Hottie before turkey time.
That's right. I love it. So real quick, Matt, and I want to ask this to the group. By the way, I recommend everybody does this. This is a very quick exercise, but it gets right to the emotional interpretation. So what is the pain of you not doing the burpees?
Pain of not doing the burpees is the problem I've had with most of my life, where I've been somewhat overweight.
Okay.
So I've not been.
So let's take this a
Okay.
level deeper, okay? Because again, back to Bob's point before, it can't just be surface level. So this is great, by the way, Matt. You're doing great. Let's take the concept of being overweight, and you're not the only one that faces this in the group, by the way. I would assume probably everybody actually in this group faces this. But if you were to take this concept of the fear of overweight, what is a level deeper here? What is the deeper emotion? And anybody can shout this out, right? What is the deeper emotion to obesity?
Well, basically depression and anxiety and self-esteem issues.
100%. 100%. So lack of confidence. And guess what else? Here's the cool part. So again, remember the funnel we talked about? When we break this down to a deeper emotion, when we say, what is the pain of not doing the burpees before I go out to eat? Well, the pain of not doing the burpees is quite simply that I could be overweight. But that's not deep enough, because guess what? There are people overweight all over the world and they don't really care. So being overweight, we have to take this a level deeper. And when we talk about that funnel and the 6 human fears, 2 present themselves here, and there might be a couple others, right? It could be the fear of poor health. It could even be the fear of death. Again, I showed my example to you guys before. Well, my biological father, he was an amateur professional basketball player. He was a bodybuilder. He was in great health. He had a slip disc. One thing led to the other. He completely let his health go out of the window. 8 years later, had a heart attack because of his eating habits. Right? So that is the fear of death. And so that can be leveraged as a pain point to, again, force action, right? It is that I don't want to have the fear of criticism. Hebrew Hottie, right? Spring's coming up. You want to get that body ready. So, that's the fear of criticism. What are other people going to think? What are other people going to say? What about the fear of poor health? Well, I could go ahead.
It's a lot of different levels. For example, I was picked on as a kid because of my weight. And so that is like, for example, you mentioned the deeper levels. I mean, literally everybody in my family is like, like the Goodyear blimp. I mean, they are so fat that when they bend over, it's as if in a solar eclipse. So when you have people with, that had that, it's true, baby got back, unfortunately. So when you have that that problem in the family where most of my family is obese, both on my mother's side and my father's side. In fact, all three of my parents, my dad, my mother, and my stepmom are all type diabetic because they didn't take care of themselves. I mean, my God, I mean, how much more motivation do you need than that? So only me and my brother are skinny. Everybody else is a fat fuck. So that is the problem here, is that between being picked on as a kid, my shitty, biological chemistry because of my parents and their bad habits. I mean, to me, doing burpees is a no-brainer because all that, is like Celine Dion, where it all comes back to me now. So there's plenty of pain there that is deeply rooted. And I know you mentioned that, and that's why I wanted to sit there and, bring it to light. So.
And Matt, real quick, and then we can shift a little bit, but I would challenge you to get to the origin of that memory. I would challenge you to go back to that place of childhood where that first came. And so what I'm saying is that when you express these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, there is an emotional trigger there, right? That creates this response. So I would challenge you to use that funnel, get to the actual root, and isolate that one emotion. And that'll give you a lot of power in it. So we can talk about that separately, but that's a really powerful technique here. So one last thing here, I want to express this very, very much. This is not my opinion. This is backed by tons of science. Environment is drastically more powerful than heredity. Environment is more powerful than heredity. I'll give you a very quick story on this. You guys have heard this one. Love this story. And then I want to share another part, and then we're going to do the exercise and we'll close out. So the story is simple. It's a little bit long, but my mom is a very crafty woman. One day she was gifted an old iron tub with the feet. You guys know what I'm talking about? They weigh a ton. She got this tub. She was so excited. She was pumped to make her little tub a pond. So she paints it and she puts this little water fountain in, and she puts all this beautiful vegetation around it. And you go outside, it's this beautiful little pond. This happened in the summer. So coincidentally, our family went to the carnival. We go to the carnival. We won a couple games, got some goldfish, went back home, put the goldfish in the pond. Mom's happy. Cool. We used to go on these walks around the neighborhood every day. And when we would go on the walk, we realized that there was a little runoff pond. So, of course, me being a little young guy, I wanted to go check this little pond out. I run over there. I see hundreds of goldfish. And so I walk into this goldfish pond. I go all the way to the center, which is right up to the bottom of my chin. And I'm just holding a bucket. I'm just grabbing goldfish, throwing these goldfish in the pond, right? Walking around this whole pond, water up to my chin. I do this about 3 or 4 more times. Summer is starting to come to an end. Now, again, my mom's in Maryland, so there are a lot of blue herons there. So what we realized was the blue herons love to eat goldfish. So each month we would deplete our goldfish stock. And again, we would go back to the pond, get more goldfish. So the last time I went to this little pond, I show up, and this was something from like a Stephen King novel. I show up and animal control is all around this pond. They're emptying the pond. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing to our goldfish pond? Like, this is my goldfish stock. What are you doing? And he goes, well, one of the neighbors called. This neighbor, and this is a true story, this neighbor had a boa constrictor. The boa constrictor lived in their basement, and they had this massive aquarium that held this boa constrictor in their basement. It had been with the family for 12 years. 12 years, this boa constrictor lived with them. In that time frame, the boa constrictor grew to 10 feet. It was 10 feet in length, okay? This boa constrictor had escaped from the house, escaped from the cage, and it went and nestled itself in this little goldfish pond. So for the 3 months that I was chin deep in this water, there was a live boa constrictor just swimming around me that whole time. I could have been gone at any point. When they found the boa constrictor almost 4 months after it had left from the house, when they found the boa constrictor, it was almost 13 feet long. So let's break this math down real quick. The boa constrictor was with the family for 12 years and it was only 10 feet long. It got out into a different environment, which was this massive pond. It got out into a different environment. And in almost 4 months, it grew nearly 3 feet. So again, environment is more powerful than heredity. And so when we talk about our heredity or a predisposition to something, that is an emotional interpretation. You can change anything about your construct physically, mentally, or emotionally by the environment you put yourself in. So I want you guys to hold on to that story. It's a true story. All right. So my last point to pleasure, I want to share this with you, and then I'd love to do this exercise and then we'll close out. Okay. So my last story with pleasure, Karen Pryor. You can look her up. She's done a lot of amazing things with dolphins. Okay. So Karen Pryor, she's a big name with Bumblebee. There's all kinds of stuff that she's done in that environment. And what she did, we talked about Pavlovian theory and the affiliation with pain and dogs. So Karen Pryor took a different approach. She wanted to test this out with pleasure or a reward system. So by the way, there's something called encephalization quotient, which is EQ for short, which is different than IQ. EQ basically takes the weight of the brain and the weight of the organism and gives you a number. For example, chimpanzees have an EQ of 1.76. Okay. Dolphins, which Karen Pryor tested, dolphins have an EQ of 5.7, which is the highest in the animal kingdom outside of humans at 7.4. So what I'm saying is based on EQ, a dolphin has the most similar EQ to humans of any other animal. And for decades, it was believed that EQ was actually the measurement for intelligence of any organism, which in fact is not the case. And that's where we later developed IQ, which basically determines that habits, motives, and environment bear more weight in intelligence than the EQ does itself. Okay. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, dolphins are awesome. EQ is cool. What does that have to do with me and pleasure? So when we look at Karen Pryor, she did these tests with the dolphins. Now they basically had this massive tank. And what they would do is they didn't use auditory conditioning. They tried that, but it didn't work. They would send sound waves under the water, kind of like a whale, if you've ever heard whales speaking, but it didn't have the same approach. So they started to use food again. So with the food concept, here's what they determined. They determined that if you were to give a dolphin a fish, which was the reward, on the 10th jump and the 10th jump only, the dolphin would jump all 9 times prior, but it would put very, very minimal effort in all 9 times prior. It put full exertion and effort on the 10th attempt when it knew it was receiving a reward. So she did this repeated over and over and over again. And what she found was that if you continue to reward a specimen, in this case, specifically a dolphin, if you were to reward a specimen the same way repeatedly, the effort starts to minimize. This is directly relatable to humans because how often do you have a reward system? Now, in Matt's case, I do the burpees, I get to go out to eat. So you're using the same technique here, my friend. But the point is that, again, if you were to do the same reward every single time for the same task, at some point, your motivation is so minimal that your discipline becomes difficult to maintain. So the point that I'm making in Karen Pryor's research with dolphins is when you set up a reward or a pleasure system for yourself, it cannot be the same stagnant reward repeated over time for the exact same reward or for the exact same outcome or effort put forth. You have to vary your reward system. For instance, you could say, hey, look, my goal is $100,000 profit for Q4. If you go through Q4 and your reward is to go to the beach, when you go into Q1, if you have the same goal, you can still go to the beach. Just don't go to the same beach. You have to vary the reward. Okay. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns on this?
Well, I'm just a little confused because I mean, I know this study that you talk about and this effect, and it's used very much by supervisors and managers. If I leave you alone and you're doing a repetitive task, and you know I'm going to come to see you on the top of the hour every time to check in on you, you stop doing work and then you start doing work when you know I'm coming 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and then I get there and I go, oh, you guys are very productive. You've been doing work for the full hour, but you haven't. So what you do as a manager and or as a supervisor, you vary the times and they never know when you're going to come. This way they have to be productive all the time because they can never know when you're going to come. That's very powerful in predicting human behavior or predicting human behavior. I'm having a hard time wrapping it around my head for my own internal pleasure. I understand what you're saying. Like I can reward myself not so regularly. How does that help me sustain my activity if I know I'm the one who's giving the reward? I'm having a little trouble with that.
It's a great question. Does anybody have any thoughts on this?
I'll chime in. Ultimately, you have to get to the goal the way you're going to get more happiness in life, Bob. And so, for example, me, the pain of being overweight or slightly overweight, it basically is not acceptable anymore. So I just came to the epiphany, the one that I mentioned about the burpees and then going out for food a week ago. So one of the things that we spoke about last week was reflection and how important that is. And in pain and pleasure, at some point you are reflecting on what you have gone through and what has transpired to have less pain or more pleasure. So reflection is important too and all that. And that's what I was doing because I was doing the same old shit. I wasn't getting the result that I wanted. And it was like that spiky hair lady back from the 90s stopped the insanity. And so that's kind of where I was. And I said, okay, I need to sit there and do something differently than what I'm doing now. Whatever I'm doing is not working. So, but ultimately, I have this vision in my head that I'm going to be, without the pain of being overweight, and I'll be in much better shape, and I won't end up like most of my family. So the end goal is what I'm looking for. It's like the Holy Grail without Monty Python and Indiana Jones.
So real quick, Bob, I just want to isolate your particular question for a second. I believe your question was more around the fact that how do I vary the reward system if I'm the one setting the reward? Is that what your question was? Yeah, so I think that Matt did touch on an important point, and that is the power of reflection, right? So capturing that measurement process or that conditioning process. So let me ask you this, Bob, when you isolate that particular question, how do I vary this when I'm the one setting the reward? What is the real block? Is it the reward that you're setting? Is it the conditioning itself? Is it the system? Is it like what part of that is the block? Is it that you set the reward, or is it that you're trying to decipher when do I vary that reward?
Well, both, I guess. So it's kind of both. But it's more the first part. I mean, if I'm the one who is setting the reward, then I know I'm going to get it, right? Because I mean, because I'm not that disciplined to say like if I don't do the burpees, I'm not going to go out to eat. Well, I'm going to go out to eat anyway, right? I'm not that disciplined, and so it's a little bit difficult for me. But also, what Matt said triggered something in me in that. Like if it's the burpees and then going out to eat is the reward, after a while that doesn't become a reward. I have to change the reward.
That's it. That's the point.
Right.
You nailed
Okay,
it.
that's what I got. All
exactly.
Right, good.
So great point. So again, if you associate massive amounts of pain with anything, a word, a habit, an outcome, you will avoid it. If you associate massive reward with anything, you will seek it. So here's a little nugget that I'll share with you, Bob, to answer your question directly. Here's what I would do. And by the way, I'm doing this on December 8th. I have that free webinar. So if anybody wants to jump on that, that's really what we're talking about here. What I would do, Bob, is I would separate goals. You have two types of goals. You've got your lifestyle goals, right? And that's everything in the life wheel, right? You know all that stuff. You're an amazing coach. I know you know all that stuff. So that's the lifestyle, right? That's the lifestyle goals we have. I always recommend that you want to have more concentration and focus on the lifestyle goals. That should be about 75% of your goal setting exercise. That last 25%, those are material goals. That could be a trip, a memory, it could be a new shirt, whatever it is, right? So the way that I really like to do this is that I set out my lifestyle goal, and then upon completion, I will associate a material goal with it. That pulls me towards it. And then what you do is you associate a massive amount of pain if you don't do that. So let's do this. Let's do this last exercise because this is going to help you exactly. This is exactly what I would do, guys. Look, I know that a lot of people come on these calls and they see this information and they do nothing with it. I'm telling you, this little exercise right here is absolute gold. Do this one thing today, and I guarantee you personally, you will see results from it. Okay. Do this one thing. So here's what I want you to do. And you can do this right now. We only have a couple minutes left, but I want you to write down 3 actions you have been putting off. It doesn't matter how small or how large they are, right? It could be as simple as, I just need to put my clothes away. It could be, I need to get my taxes done. It could be any of these things. Write down 3 actions you've been putting off. Give me a thumbs up when you got it. Awesome. So you've got your 3 actions you've been putting off. Now, the second part is write down, and you have to write all of this. Why have you not done it? Why have you not done it? What pain have you linked to the action? For example, for me on taxes, it's nitty gritty. It's, you know, I have to sit down. I have to spend the time doing something that I absolutely don't want to do. That's why I haven't done it, because I could be using my time to do something else. Now, again, we want to get deep into the emotion, right? So what pain have you linked to that actual action? Whatever the 3 actions are, what pain have you linked to it? Okay. Number 3, write the pleasure you have had in the past from indulging. Okay. So let's take Matt's example again. Let's say that the action that have been putting off might be, let's just say it's the gym. If it's the gym, hasn't happened because don't want to do it, don't want to spend the time, don't want to spend them, whatever it is, right? The pleasure from indulging would be all of the times in the past. What did you gain from eating the food you wanted? You know, back to Bob's point is, well, the discipline around, well, if I want to eat this, I'm just going to go eat it. So what pleasure have you gained from indulging in that previously? Okay. Now, this is the biggest part, and this is where you leverage that pain based on the whole conversation. Write what it is going to cost you not to change. Now, again, Bob did an amazing job of illustrating this. We want to capture the deep emotion. Money is not enough. You can't just say, oh, well, the pain for me going out to eat is that I'm going to have less money available. That is not strong enough. You must have a deeper emotion tied to what it's going to cost you not to change, right? For example, again, taxes. The IRS might come after you. You might get audited. I mean, those are some pretty scary things. Number 5, write the pleasure that you will receive by your new actions starting now. So again, in light of the exercise concept, well, the pleasure that you will receive, your confidence is going to boost. Your metabolism is going to go up. You are going to have less criticism and more confidence when you do get the Hebrew hottie body on the gym, on the beach, right? Whatever it is, what is that pleasure you will gain by starting right now? Okay, so again, we want to write our 3 things we've been putting off. We want to write why we haven't done it. What is the pain linked to doing it? We want to write the pleasure we've gained in the past from indulging. right? What it's going to cost not to change, and then the pleasure we will receive from our new action. I guarantee you, if you do this exercise and actually write it out, it will generate results for you. Talk to me. What questions, comments, or snide remarks do you guys have?
It's 10 o'clock.
That there are things that I should be doing.
Should or should not?
I should.
Should. Like what, if you don't mind sharing?
I mind sharing.
Okay, that's
don't wanna
fine. That's
share
fine.
my-
Then keep it to yourself.
Yeah. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is if I don't change, like what pain is that gonna bring? Because it's almost something I've already kind of dabbled in, because I'm like, oh my God, this is a problem. So I think that's powerful to really put that in perspective.
That's amazing. Now, I want to share one with you that comes up a lot in my world, is people that are wanting to stop any form of substance abuse, whether that's drinking, indulgence of sex, smoking weed, whatever it is. And so often, let's just take the smoking weed, for example. So I see this one all the time. And when people go down this route, one of the first pain points that comes up is, well, it's expensive. But again, that's not deep enough. That's not deep enough to elicit change. A better way to be, or to address that would be, well, what about memory loss? What about the lack of interpersonal skills? Like all of the pain that comes with it if you don't create that change. So anyway, anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns here? Okay, awesome, guys. So I hope that you were able to gain. Yeah, of course. I hope you guys were able to gain some value on this. Again, I highly recommend and I challenge everybody in here to do that exercise. It will help you. I promise it will. If you need any help, shoot me a text. If you get through it and you want somebody to help hold you accountable, I'd be happy to do that as well. Let me know how I can support you on this, but use that exercise, write it down, practice it, print it out, put it on your computer, whatever you've got to do, use it. Love you guys. Let's have an amazing Tuesday. And I'm here if you need anything.
Thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Session.